Welcome back. We'll talk about disaster management in this video. So exactly talking about what is disaster, how can we contain it. So basically the risk associated with disaster. Henceforth, we'll talk about disaster risk management as we proceed. So, what is disaster risk management cycle? Now, this is very important to understand for the mere fact that if you can understand the cycle and probably the stages, you will be able to understand where to intervene and where not to do around it. Speaking of it, disaster is a random event. You look at it in the whole of the space. There's this is the point. There's disaster. Otherwise, there's everywhere is normalcy, right? It's only in the during disaster that things becomes abnormal. People are being shaken to the core. So disaster risk management. How do we proceed with it? Basic idea is there are four stages for the risk management. And if you look very closely, what you people will be seeing in the screen is there the four stages I have earmarked in a different colors altogether. Now, what are those four stages? Let me tell it to you. One, the moment the disaster strike, you have to respond. You can be a spectator or you can decide to fight it back to survive. Now, that is what your response should be. Once you have started responding, then probably post the event, what happens is, can you bring your life back to normalcy? And that is what is recovery is all about it. Yes, the whole concept of this disaster management plan is to manage the risk reduction and probably prepare ourselves for a future where certain unwarranted event might take place. So yes, this is what disaster risk management cycle is all about it. It is all about your response. It is all about your recovery. It is all about your risk reduction and probably preparedness. And now, if you see very clearly, very understood, this part of the cycle I have earmarked it as a blue color, and this mark in a very light pinkish color, if we may say so. Why so? Because I want to demarcate what exactly the fact that this blue color is nothing but post disaster event. After the disaster has happened, this is the only thing that you can do. You can respond, and you need to choose what kind of response you want to like to have, and then probably how do you plan for your recovery. But what about pre-disaster? Pre-disaster are the two steps that goes around it, all about reducing risk, all about being prepared for any sort of eventualities, and that is what pre-disaster would always be around it. Remember, pre-disaster or preparedness or risk reduction will automatically contain the calamities, contain the degree of destruction to a minimal level, a level which from where you can bounce back. And that is what disaster risk management is all about it. Allow me to fabricate further stages into these four stages if it has been understood. Allow me to build wherever risk can be averted. What are those eight stages that comes around it? And this is what will be seen to you. Now, exactly what is a response? There might be responses in terms of relief, in terms of rescue. So relief is providing, probably you cannot help it to do enough with it. Things have already happened, probably trying to make things happen on a normalcy to a certain extent. Even in those unwarranted abnormal situation, relief is bringing the food, water, and medical aid. Probably rescue, probably this is where you need to pick up your lift or shift people, victims of that event, to a safer place. So there are two types of responses that goes around it. Either you can rescue them or you can relieve them. So what about recovery? This is where we talk about rehabilitation, is bringing life to normal, reconstruction, bringing properties to the normal scenario. The society needs to work around time and again, as the case might be. This is what we are talking post disaster. What happens with pre disaster is a risk prevention. Can we prevent it? Best possible scenario is if we can prevent a disaster. See, natural disaster like an earthquake, tsunami, probably a cyclone or a typhoon, uh, difficult to control, right, or contain. But probably we can develop something called early warning system. That's one of the prevention or mitigation process, as the case might be. So this would be the natural disaster. It can be mitigated or prevented to a certain extent, but there are human-induced disaster also. Let's say a terrorism attack, or probably a deliberate virus spread that might be maybe made towards it. Now, how do we go it? Can we prevent it? Can we contain it? Can we have sufficient intelligence to ensure that there are no unwarranted terrorist attack, or there are no unwanted medical emergencies thrown upon our races, our humanity? So that is what needs to be done as far as human induced disasters is all about it. Yes, we are talking about preparedness, nothing like it, like stockpiling. When I say stockpiling, it need not be only food and drink, but probably medicines too, probably technologies too, genome sequence too, and yes, early warning system. Nothing can beat around it. So these are the disaster risk management cycle, if I may say so. Both of responses, we have rescue and relief. Recovery would be rehabilitation and reconstruction. Risk reduction is all about mitigation and preparedness, and preparedness preventions. Preparedness is all about stock piling and early warning. So look at the picture. This is something which is happening. The disaster has stuck out here, and see what is left. Nothing. Absolutely rubble. The building that was standing is not there, and I shudder to think about it, about the people living in this particular building. What might have happened? But yes, this is post-disaster that goes around it. So traditional approach is, anyone in distress, we intend to help the person in distress. One has to help the victim. Collection of grains, vegetables by relative, neighbors during disaster, friends, families, and so on and so forth. Yes, trying to help them in whatever little way that one can. Disaster disabled and building a rest platform for victims. Collecting help from each and every other people. This is what we are looking out here. This is the traditional approach, is all about it. Yes, talking about a sustainable development approach. This approach facilitates the adoption of disaster mitigation program at local level, including structural and non-structural measures. It promotes the incorporation of disaster risk management in development planning. It enhances the capacity and probably coping system as on when on basis at different levels. These are the things that needs to go around it. Every sector needs to be identified, and probably they should be ensured that they become self-sufficient in managing a disaster proactively and effectively. So vulnerability reduction approach, another approach is uh, making it much more resistant to disaster. This approach addresses both the vulnerability and the resilience factor by going to the root cause of the stress, by understanding what catastrophic impact a disaster can bring in, thereby trying to strengthen, educating, and probably building such some sort of resilience into them. It includes a number of coordinated activities. Let's say vulnerability assessment, preventions, mitigation, preparedness of responses for such events. This insists of rebuilding resilience capacity. I have been trying to tell it to you since the moment one, is all about resilience. It's all about future planning. It's all about uneventful an uneventful day, or probably uneventful factors as far as human capabilities are concerned. Now, how can we build it up? How do we make the community strength stronger and bring life to normalcy? This is what we are looking for at the vulnerability reduction approach, is all about it. Now, one thing is to build capacities. Build capacities not for individual but for community, not for community but for society, not for society but for the whole country, not for the whole country, for the whole planet, for the whole species. This is what we should be looking into it, so that we build such capacities such so as to absorb any harmful hazardous stress or shocks that can usurp the livelihood. It focuses on building adaptive capacities of livelihood. It's a two-way approach, absolutely yes. Two-way approach of reducing hazards, exposures, and sensitivity, at the same time enhancing or coping the restoration capacity of those vulnerable on the others. That needs to be understood time and again. So resilience, community connectedness. This is very true as far as resilience is concerned. How do we build resiliences? Risk and vulnerability, planning and procedures, availability of resources, time and again. We'll talk about the resiliences. One is a collective responses, the community. One about the risk and vulnerability. Can we reduce it? Can we plan and proceed procedures? Stockpiling, probably early warning system, probably ensuring that we can have resources elsewhere also, so that our livelihood becomes much more normal, or springs back to normal as soon as it can. Then comes the available resources as such. What can we make out of it as the lowest cost approach, as the minimum impact that one can endure upon it. Look at this particular pic that I have shown it for you. We have a wonderful quality of life out here. But what happens goes to it when there's a disaster strikes, your quality drops, and we have a quality life which drops altogether. And then there is the shock factor which might actually let the person or the community go down. This is what is vulnerable as we so need to understand this shock, the shock that comes around it. We need to ensure that we spring back to normal again and again. We should remove this scenario altogether. That will show the strength of resiliency. The key that challenges are behavior, lack of authority for bearing, and lack of authority bearing, or less accountability, being equitable for everywhere, converting situation into personal opportunities to gain, tendency of playing with loopholes, and weak compliances as on when on basis. So that is the key challenges. Thereby you need to understand everything right now. We talk about structures, technical and financial capacity to successfully implement plans, difficult terrain, and weak logistic, resulting in delayed response. What do you mean by delayed or difficult terrain? It might be mountainous zone, it can be flood prone zone, there can be no mode of transportation which is difficult. The network, the mobile network connectivity is down. This hampers the logistic effort, so there is a delay in responses. Management of the warehouses, probably where we have stockpiles which are not insufficient, probably stockpiles which have expiry dates. So we need to understand those things, train and consolidate the search and rescue team. SRT is what we need to go around, search and rescue team. Very important, because this will help us to save not only properties but also lives. Communication equipment, network is very important, very pertinent. It is a central theme in a modern life. Without a network, without connectivity, probably people might get lost. Implementation of national building codes, management of evacuation site, this is something which needs to be adhered to. You need to mention where what are the evacuation procedures, site, process to be adopted. Limited fire services, again this is one of those emergency services probably which gets stressed thin. Why? Because of disaster. Why? Because you have limited resources and unlimited requirement. So risk insurance and transferring the risk as on when on basis. Here is what I wanted to go around it. This particular pick, what are we doing around? We are playing with nature. We are fiddling with nature. In fact, we are uh, turning nature upside down for our benefit, being myopic in our viewpoint, being short-sighted in our viewpoint. We don't understand for today's luxury. We are actually sacrificing tomorrow's comfort, and sustainability is a big question that needs to be understood. Look what has happened. Everybody is cutting tea, with the mere fact that tea is the only organism which produces oxygen. That is very much required. In fact, that is the only requirement for life to sustain. Without oxygen, it won't sustain. And what are we doing as a species, as a human being? We are destroying forest after forest, cutting down trees and trees. So remember what the University of Calcutta's professor would have said of a value of tree. It says, uh, TM Das says a tree living for 50 years, believe me, half a century, will generate approximately $31,250 worth of oxygen. Immaculate. Look at what we are looking around it. That is equivalent to providing 62,000 worth of air pollution control. It not only air pollution, which also controls soil erosion, increases soil fertility in the tune of 31,250, recycles approximately 37,500 worth of water, provides home for animal worth rupees 31,250. That what are we looking into it? We are looking approximately 1.5 million worth of dollars just by one tree. And believe me, this is not taking into consideration about the value of fruit that it bears, the beauty that it brings around it. It does it make sense to cut down tree? Look at the pic that I have shown it to you for you to understand. There is this lone tree for which the man has actually transcribed their road. Otherwise, what would people would have done it? People would have made a straightway road and sacrificed this tree altogether. But believe me, this is the value of the tree. If we don't understand today, it is going to cost us out the future. So collective solutions to individual is what we should be looking into it. Remember, the American dream is only for the individual solution, which is changing, believe me or not. European tradition is for collective solution about the community. What should we do? Should we look for our individual comfort or should we look for a community well-being? Now, that is the question that we need to answer before going around it. I would love to wind up this particular video with this statement, wherein we have been taught in our school that we are the tertiary animal. We are the top of the value chain or the food chain if it goes around it. Now, this is how we plan it around. This is wrong concept. Look what we have done. This is a wrong concept. The man on the top, the woman on there, then there's a whale and the rest of the animals around here. This is a wrong concept. The right aptitude is we should be a part of the kingdom. This is a planet not only for human species but for the rest of the species also. And believe me, without the help of the other species, this planet will not be sustainable even for human beings also. So that should be the right approach to go around it. With this concept, allow me to wind up this particular presentation for disaster management cycle. Thank you for watching this video till the end.